The girl was already dead to most folks by the time Jeremiah found her. She lay half-buried beneath wind-blown snow, no shoes, no coat, and a ragged dress stuck to her skin like it had frozen there. Her face was cut and bruised, and her lips were blue. If not for the shallow rise and fall of her chest, he would have kept riding, but she breathed. Barely. Jeremiah Klein hadn't meant to come this way. His trapline veered east, up along the edge of the Wind River. But the storm had chased him low into the pass, and now here he was, watching a girl who didn't look much older than 20, crumpled near the rocks like she'd been thrown there today. Buzzard flapped away when his boots hit the ground that he crouched, lifted her wrist. Bones. That's all it was. Skin, bone, and a scatter of bruises that looked like they came from more than weather. Some fresh, some old. She didn't stir when he touched her, but when he eased his coat off and wrapped it around her shoulders, she flinched. Like a kicked dog, he swore under his breath and slid his arms beneath her, lifting her like he'd lift a broken deer. She weighed next to nothing. Her head lolled against his chest, a shock of tangled blonde hair matted against her face. "You hold on," he muttered. "Ain't your time to go just yet." 2 hours later, his cabin door slammed open with a gust of snow behind it. Jeremiah carried her in and set her down on the bed closest to the fire. It was a sparse place, logs stacked high against one wall, dried meat hanging near the rafters, a table made from split pine and held together with rawhide knots. He moved quick, unlaced her dress just enough to keep her breathing clear, wrapped her in 2 wool blankets, and stacked more wood in the hearth. Then he knelt and tore open a biscuit he'd kept from the morning. Dry, but it was all he had. He put a piece to her lips. "Come on, girl. You eat." "Nothing." "Eat," he said again, softer now. His hand was trembling slightly. She opened her mouth a little. Just enough. He fed her like she was a child, watching her every swallow. She didn't speak, didn't open her eyes. But she ate. Only when she was asleep again did he slump into the chair near the fire, fingers tight around the handle of his tin mug. Outside, the snow howled against the cabin walls. Inside, the only sound was her slow breathing and the crackle of flame. He didn't know her name, didn't know who'd done that to her, but he knew what it meant to look like that. Used, thrown away, left for the vultures. And she wasn't the first soul Jeremiah Klein had carried into this cabin on the edge of nowhere. 6 days earlier, he'd ridden into Riverton for winter salt and fresh cartridges. The town had changed. More wagons. More strangers. And a tension in the air that didn't sit right. In the saloon, 2 men were whispering over whiskey. "Did you hear what happened to that girl? The one that came in with the gambler." "Which gambler?" "The one with the red coat. From Cheyenne. Said he bought her for cards. Said she'd gone mad. Stripped down and ran out in the snow." The other man snorted. "She weren't mad. Just didn't want to lie with him no more." They laughed. Jeremiah didn't. He left before finishing his drink. Didn't know why then. Just felt like leaving. Like something was pulling at his gut. Now, in the firelight, watching that girl's chest rise and fall beneath his blankets, he knew. She hadn't gone mad. She'd run. And they'd let her die, or maybe made sure she didn't make it far. He leaned back in the chair and rubbed a hand through his beard. "You got a name?" he asked the sleeping girl. "Or do I just call you Miracle?" No answer, of course. Just the fire popping and snow thudding soft against the window panes. But in that stillness, something shifted, not outside. In him. Long time ago, Jeremiah Klein had worn blue and carried a Springfield rifle through Tennessee mud. He'd seen a lot of death, caused more than his share. When the war ended, he came west because there wasn't a place back east where a man like him could settle his bones. He'd built this cabin with his own hands, put his name on no map, spoke to no one unless he had to. But something about this girl, this bundle of frost and silence and barely their breath, was thawing a place in him he'd long since frozen over. He stood, walked to the fire, and grabbed his last round loaf of bread. It was 3 days old, hard as stone. He cracked it in half, placed one chunk on the table. Then he walked back to the bed, knelt down, and put the other half near her hand. "There," he whispered. "My last bread. Yours now." Her fingers twitched. Breath hitched in her throat. Jeremiah didn't smile, but he stayed beside her until dawn. The girl woke screaming. It wasn't loud, not the kind of scream that rattled windows or brought neighbors running, but it was sharp, strangled, and raw with terror. Jeremiah was outside splitting wood when he heard it, and by the time he made it back in, the girl had crawled into the far corner of the cabin, blankets clutched tight around her, eyes wild. She didn't recognize him, didn't recognize anything. Her mouth moved like she meant to speak, but no words came out. Jeremiah stepped in slow, palms out. "Ain't gonna hurt you," he said. "You're safe now." She flinched at his voice. Her shoulders curled tighter, like she expected a blow. "Name's Jeremiah. You was half dead in the snow when I found you." He knelt down by the hearth, keeping his movements careful. "Ate some bread. Slept near a fire. That's all. You been here 3 days." Still no words. But her breathing slowed. A little. She was young. 20 maybe. Face pale under the bruises. Her lips were cracked but healing. And now that she wasn't unconscious, he could see something else. Shame. Thick and heavy in her eyes. The kind that doesn't get there by accident. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he stood, ladled warm broth into a tin cup, and set it down beside her. She didn't take it, just stared at it like it might be poisoned. Jeremiah sat on the far side of the room, by the door. "I ain't a preacher. Ain't a lawman neither. Just a man that's seen enough pain to know when it don't belong." A pause. Wind outside. The soft hiss of snow sliding off the roof. "World done you wrong. That's plain." She blinked once, then reached, slow, shaking, for the tin cup. She drank. Only a sip, but that sip was a choice. By the second day, she was out of the corner. By the third, she was washing her face and sitting at the table when Jeremiah cooked. She still hadn't told him her name, but she listened when he spoke. "The pass'll stay snowed in another week," he told her one morning. "No one's coming through till thaw." He expected fear, maybe worry, but she only looked at the window and nodded. He didn't press her, didn't ask what she ran from. But Riverton wasn't far. Word would get around. Girls don't vanish from saloons without somebody noticing. He was chopping kindling near the side of the cabin when he heard hooves. 2 riders. Light. Coming up slow. He glanced toward the tree line. No snow kicked up. Just steady, cautious movement. He ducked back into the cabin, eyes on the girl. She stiffened as soon as the hoofbeats reached her ears. "You know them?" he asked. Her face said yes. Her voice, when it came, was no louder than a whisper. "He's looking for me." Jeremiah's jaw clenched. Outside, a boot hit the snow, then a voice. "Hello, the cabin." He didn't answer. "Name's Jasper Vicks. Heard tell you might have seen a runaway girl. Blonde. Little thing. Touched in the head, maybe." Jeremiah stepped to the door and opened it. Jasper stood there smiling, reins in one hand, pistol at his hip. The other man behind him looked rougher, scar on his cheek, twitchy fingers. They wore city clothes, not frontier gear. The kind of men who never lasted a winter without someone weaker than them to step on. Jeremiah didn't smile back. "Don't. No girl like that," he said. Jasper squinted. "This your cabin?" "Built it myself. Mind if we come in and warm up a minute?" "I do." The scarred one spat. "Ain't very hospitable, is he?" Jasper gave a tight grin. "Maybe he's got a lady guest, don't want no visitors." Jeremiah took one step forward. Not fast, just enough to make the porch boards groan. "You got 10 seconds to get off my land." Jasper's smile thinned. "She's mine, you know. Bought her fair in Cheyenne. She ran off, maybe got confused. She ain't right in the head, just needs some correction." Inside, the girl curled tighter in the chair. She was shaking. Jeremiah didn't look back. "She ain't here," he said. Scarface started to move, but Jasper raised a hand. "We'll be back," he said, "when the snow melts." Jeremiah didn't answer, just watched them turn and ride off through the trees. When the sound of hooves finally vanished, he stepped back inside. The girl hadn't moved. He walked to the hearth, stirred the coals. "I don't care what he thinks he bought," he said, voice like gravel. "You're not a piece of meat." She stared at him. Then, at last, her lips parted. "Clara," she said. "My name's Clara." He nodded. "Once, Clara," he repeated. That night, he bolted the door. Laid his Winchester near the bed, because Jasper Vicks wasn't gone. Not for good. And Jeremiah Klein had just picked a side. The night came hard. Wine screamed down from the ridgeline, ripping across the cabin roof like it was trying to peel the sky itself. The fire inside burned low and steady, but Jeremiah didn't sleep. He sat with his Winchester across his knees, eyes on the darkened windows. Clara curled on the cot, Her body turned toward the wall, though her eyes stayed open long. After the light dimmed, she hadn't spoken much since giving her name. Just Clara, and then silence again. But it was a start. He didn't ask more than she gave. Not yet.by morning. The snow had thinned into a fine powder. No fresh tracks. No sound but the hush of the trees. But Jeremiah knew men like Jasper. Vix. They didn't ride off for good. They circled, waited, planned. He was stacking wood behind the cabin when he found it. A smear of tobacco spit in the snow. Still wet. Not his. He scanned the trees. Nothing. When he stepped back inside, Clara was standing in the middle of the room. Her cheeks flushed from the firelight. She looked like she'd been crying. "They're going to come back," she said quietly. He didn't argue. "You could give me up," she added. Her voice wasn't bitter, just tired. Like she'd seen too many people make that choice already. "You'd still have your land. You're quiet." Jeremiah stepped toward her, boots scraping the floor. "I got no use for quiet if it means handing someone over to be beaten down like a dog." He paused. "You ain't theirs. Never were." Her chin trembled. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but didn't. Instead, she whispered, "They hurt me, Jeremiah." He didn't touch her, didn't reach for her hand or say some pretty words. He just said, "I know." Then he turned, pulled open a drawer, and began laying out his rifles. The one from the war. A second he used for hunting. He oiled the bolts in silence, letting the weight of the moment speak louder than anything else could. 2 days passed without sign. Then 3, but on the 4th, smoke appeared at a thin black ribbon curling up from the far ridge, maybe a half-day's ride east. Jeremiah spotted it before Clara did. He didn't point it out, just packed quietly, food, cartridges, blankets. When she finally asked where they were going, he looked her in the eye and said, "We ain't running. But we ain't sitting in here waiting to be surrounded either." He'd once walked a battlefield so littered with bodies you couldn't see the grass. This wasn't that. This was worse. Because it wasn't war. It was cruelty wrapped in law, masked behind polite talk and purchase papers. And Clara? She wasn't a soldier. She was a girl, the kind the world should have protected. He saddled his mule and tied her mare behind it. Clara didn't ask questions, just climbed up and held the reins. The sun was just beginning to dip when they reached the high ridge above. The valley. Jeremiah led her to an outcrop of rock. From there, they could see the trail below, and on it, 4 riders, Jasper, Vix, and 3 others, riding slow, not in a hurry. Like they owned the world. Clara's face went pale. Jeremiah handed her the spyglass. "That them?" She nodded. Silent, he didn't say anything right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. Yellowed, worn at the edges. A picture, a tintype, from years ago. A woman, 2 children, all long gone. "She was named Sarah," he said. "My wife. Didn't make it through childbirth. Twins came early. One didn't survive. The other didn't last long after." He folded the paper and tucked it away. "I seen what grief does. What loneliness does." Then he looked at Clara. "But I ain't never once seen a soul deserve what was done to you." Clara was crying now, quiet tears running down dirt-smudged cheeks. But she didn't wipe them away, just stared down at the riders getting closer. "Jeremiah," she whispered, "they'll kill you." He shook his head. "They'll try." Then he handed her the second rifle, not as heavy as the first. Shorter barrel. A repeater. She stared at it. Her hands trembled. "I ain't never shot a man before." "Good," he said. "Hope you never have to." She looked at him for a long time, then took the rifle. The riders made camp 2 miles downwind. Didn't know they were being watched, didn't act like men preparing for war. Just set their fire, tied their horses, and laughed over their supper that night. Jeremiah didn't sleep again. He kept watch, eyes on the flicker of fire through the trees. Clara stayed near, silent as snow. But around midnight, she finally whispered something. "I was born in Indiana." He turned his head slightly. Surprised. "My mama died of fever when I was 9. Papa gambled away our land and traded me to a man in Missouri. Said it was temporary. Said he'd come back." She looked down. He didn't. Jeremiah didn't speak. Let her go on. "I walked away once. Got caught. They put a bell around my ankle so they'd hear me try again." She touched her wrist. The skin there was raw. "Next time, I ran barefoot through a creek. Lost the bell. Kept going. Hitched rides. hidden wagons. Then I met Jasper. Thought he was kind. Thought he was different. Silence stretched. I was wrong, she said. Jeremiah nodded slowly, then said the only thing that mattered. You ain't alone now. Outside, the fire down below dimmed to embers, and in the silence that followed, Clara's fingers curled tight around the rifle stock. Morning would come, and with it, the reckoning. The dawn came gray and slow. Clouds blanketed the sky, and the light that filtered through the pines was cold, colorless. Jeremiah watched the riders below begin to stir, boots stamping near the fire, horses being fed. No rush in them, no fear, just the slow confidence of men who thought the law wore their scent and the land bent to their choosing. Clara sat beside him, wrapped in a wool blanket, rifle resting across her lap. Her face looked older this morning, not aged, just carved, deeper, like she'd found a place in herself she didn't know was there. You don't have to stay, Jeremiah said. Her eyes didn't move from the trail. Neither do you. They shared a quiet breath. Then he stood. We'll meet them down by the clearing, he said. Flat ground. Nothing behind us but stone. You want them to see us coming? I want them to know they're not sneaking up on anyone. He loaded both rifles, then handed her one and led the horses down. They moved slowed, and no rush in there. Boots. No nerves on their sleeves. By the time they reached the clearing, the four men were already mounted and watching. Jeremiah stood tall in the center of the open field, his coat flapping in the wind, rifle slung low but ready. Clara stayed behind him at first, then stepped out beside him. The men came forward like they were riding into a saloon. Jasper Vick smiled like it was Sunday. Well now, he said. Ain't this a pretty sight? She even cleaned up. Jeremiah didn't move. This far from town, he said, there's no sheriff to call. No judge to talk smooth to. What you say here, that's your law. Jasper raised an eyebrow. And what's yours? Jeremiah looked at Clara, then back at Jasper. My law says a man who treats a woman like cattle doesn't leave standing. Jasper laughed. Not loud, just a dry, cruel chuckle. You think you can scare me, mountain man? No, Jeremiah said softly. I don't think you scare easy, but I do think you bleed. Scarface pulled his gun. Too fast. Clara didn't flinch. Her rifle cracked before Jeremiah even raised his. The man dropped like a sack of oats, blood darkening his coat. The other two reached for iron. Jeremiah's Winchester boomed once. One rider fell, then another. Jasper alone remained, reins tight, pistol in hand, but not raised. His grin was gone now, replaced by a different kind of silence. The kind that comes when a man realizes he's not who he thought he was. You killed my men, he said, voice cracking. Jeremiah stepped forward slow. You killed yourself, Jasper. Just took longer. Clara raised her rifle again. Her hands didn't shake this time. Please, Jasper said, voice thin. I didn't mean. She was mine. No, Clara said. The gun didn't fire. She lowered it and turned away. I won't carry you with me, she whispered. Not like that. Jasper didn't speak again. Jeremiah stepped beside Clara. Go, he said. And Jasper did, spurred his horse and rode hard back the way he came, not once looking back at the bodies of the men who'd followed him. Jeremiah and Clara stood in the silence that followed in law. No crowd, just trees and wind and the long shadows of the men who would not ride again. They buried the dead before the sun hit noon, not because they deserved it, because leaving them to rot would have said something about who Jeremiah was and who Clara might become. After the graves were marked with simple stone, they rode north in words for a while. Just the sound of hooves on frozen dirt and the wind whispering through tall grass. But by the time the trees thinned and the first hawk circled above, Clara finally spoke. You ever think about going back? To where? Where you came from? He was quiet a moment, then said, no one left there. Not in the ways that matter. She nodded. I think I'm done running. Jeremiah looked over. She was staring at the horizon, eyes soft but steady. You ain't running, he said. You're choosing. They didn't speak again for a long while, but their horses moved side by side, and the silence between them no longer felt like something broken. It felt like something healing. And behind them, the trail slowly disappeared beneath wind, snow, and the hush of a land that remembered. but did not speak. 3 years later, the girl who had once shivered under Jeremiah's coat now walked with bare arms in the Wyoming spring, sleeves rolled, hair braided back, dirt on her hands and sun on her cheeks. Clara laughed as she tried to coax a stubborn goat back into the pen, her voice echoing against the distant hills. A pie sat cooling on the windowsill behind her. The scent of cinnamon and huckleberry drifted into the warm air. Jeremiah watched from the porch, a tin cup in hand, his beard a little grayer, his shoulders still wide and steady. He didn't smile often, but when he looked at her now, free, barefoot in the soft grass, his face softened in that quiet way it always did when something was too good for words. The ranch had grown. Not by much, but enough. A second cabin was nearly finished. 2 hands from Riverton helped with the cattle and fencing. And once a week, a young Paiute boy from the nearby valley brought news, sugar, and sometimes a book. But none of that had changed the way Jeremiah measured peace. He measured it in mornings where no one cried, that I in nights when she sang without knowing it, I in the way she no longer jumped at thunder or avoided her own reflection in the window pane. Inside, by the hearth, a little cedar box sat on the mantel. Inside it were the only things she had carried when he found her: a broken necklace, a button from some long-gone coat, and a strip of stained cloth. She hadn't touched it in over a year, didn't need to anymore. Because memory, Clara had said, once was not a chain, it was a door. And she'd chosen to walk through it. It was mid-April when the rider came. Dusty hat, badge on his chest. Not Riverton's sheriff. U.S. Marshal. Jeremiah saw him first, chopping wood at the edge of the trail. The marshal reined in, nodded. Jeremiah Klein? Jeremiah nodded back. I'm not here for trouble, the man said quickly. Just came to ask something. Jeremiah didn't invite him in, that didn't offer coffee, that he just waited. The marshal cleared his throat. 3 years ago, there was a man named Jasper Vicks, known for running girls through mining camps. He disappeared. So did 2 of his men. We found the bones last month. Names match. Some wanted posters going back 6 years. Jeremiah didn't move. Not a twitch. The marshal went on. You don't have to say a thing. There's nothing official being filed. Man like Jasper. Well, the world's better without him. Jeremiah looked toward the cabin. Inside, Clara was humming to herself, kneading bread. The marshal followed his gaze. That her? Jeremiah said nothing. She's safe. Now, the marshal said. That's all I wanted to know. Then he tipped his hat and rode on. Jeremiah watched until the rider disappeared into the trees. He didn't tell Clara about the marshal, didn't need to. That evening, she stood on the porch beside him, wiping flour from her hands. Something. Change? She asked. No, he said. Just the world catching up. She looked at him, long and steady. You think it ever forgets? He shook his head. No, but it moves on. She nodded, then leaned her head against his shoulder. That summer, Clara started teaching the Paiute boy how to read. He was smart, quicker than any of them expected. She gave him books and stories, and, sometimes, the gift of silence, a kind of knowing that doesn't need explaining. That fall, Jeremiah built a swing. Hung it from the old cottonwood that had stood longer than either of them. They sat under it one evening, wrapped in a single quilt, and watched the sun bleed gold across the valley. I was dead once, Clara whispered. Jeremiah didn't speak. But you gave me your last bread. He turned his head. She was smiling, tears in her eyes. But that wasn't the thing that saved me, she said. You never looked at me like I was broken. Not once. He looked down. I was, she added. But you let me figure out how to mend. Jeremiah cleared his throat, reached for her hand, held it like a man who knew what it meant to lose everything. You mended us both, he said. They sat there until the stars came out. And in that stillness, years after a man in red silk tried to buy her silence. After blood had soaked the winter snow, Clara finally felt what she had once thought she'd never feel again. Whole. And she would carry that quiet freedom, not like a flag, not like a scar, but like a lamp she could hand to others still walking through the dark.